Well, the title I was given was "What Difference Does Chaplaincy Make?" And so I'm going to speak under three headings. First being the employers, second the employees, and finally the churches. In terms of what difference does chaplaincy make to the employers, I think that the cynical could say it's a cheap way for them to provide some employee support. It's occupational health on the cheap. And it is indeed the case that many companies nowadays have given up and greatly reduced their own HR departments or occupational health departments, and perhaps subscribe to a national telephone counselling service so that someone can ring up a number and be allocated 6 sessions of telephone support. And many people find it difficult to access that sort of support because of the anonymity. At its best, I think chaplaincy can be seen as an additional strand of support. The chaplain can work alongside occupational health and, for instance, trade unions in a complementary way, and that people can, and managers indeed, can refer back and forwards as somebody comes with a particular need. They can think who would be the best support for them and suggest to the employee where to take their concerns. And so I think for companies, having a chaplain is perceived by the employees as kind. It's perceived as caring, and it improves the sense of that the employees have of the company as caring for them and trying to meet their needs. And whether people want to use you themselves or not, they will voice that. They'll say, the police will say, I think it's really good to have a chaplain for people who might need it. And the implication is often poor weedy souls not like me. But, that there could be people who would need help, and chaplaincy could provide that. And so I think for employers, it helps to discharge their duty of care. And let's face it, a lot of workplace time is lost through stress-related absence, and anything which can help to make the workforce happier is going to be economically useful. And I think when I'm trying to sell chaplaincy to an employer, I will say it's a kind of upstream intervention that people are, coasting along, and you can see things are getting difficult, that there's going to be a crash, but sometimes a chat with the chaplain can sort of head off the crisis because you're able to point them to some appropriate resource and signpost that. And the chaplain will often have a lot of local knowledge that the national telephone service can't possibly have. I think the other thing that chaplaincy can make a difference to employers over is that you can be a kind of conscience. And not every employer will welcome that, or they may say they do. It's a bit like being a school governor where you're called a critical friend. Everybody loves the friend bit, but once you attempt the critical bit, they get less keen to take your calls or see you. But there are some employers who are genuinely concerned about their duty in a way. I've had conversations with Guy Turville, who was there from the Swiss Laundry recently, about the living wage. And that's something that I'm thinking about, that I'm proposing we make the topic for our next newsletter. Maybe we'll do a breakfast briefing, because I think it's very interesting, and I think it's something that as Christians the church has spoken out about. And here in Cambridge there is a huge disparity in wages. We have some of the best paid people who are mostly doing jobs that they absolutely love, that they might well do for free, some of them, because they find it so exciting and stimulating, but they're massively remunerated. And then we have very low paid people working, servicing the academics, the hospitals, looking after those busy people's elderly parents that they haven't got time to care for themselves, but who are being paid, or barely enough to pay rent in Cambridge. Well, not enough to pay rent in Cambridge. They have to live out in villages where they can afford. And so I think you can raise issues if you earn the trust of the employer and the bosses and the management. You can sometimes raise issues, or they will feel they can raise issues because the chaplain is independent and confidential. Those are particular selling points that the chaplain brings to the company, of being someone who's come from outside, and they kind of know you have a Christian agenda, so they respect that in terms of values, but you don't have an agenda in the way that perhaps consultants who've been brought in do. And so I think it is possible to become a trusted friend that can hold a mirror up and say, this is what I have observed, this would be my reflection. And particularly if you're able to hang around for a few years, the value of your input is greatly increased, because you can provide continuity. And quite often in workplaces now there's a lot of chopping and changing, and it's quite useful to have someone who can say, I have seen this happen. So that's the difference the chaplaincy can make to employers. And a second thought was what difference it can make to employees. As I hinted before, a lot of people are reticent about being thought to need help, and particularly in the current climate in certain areas we provide chaplaincy for, such as the police, where there's a great fear of redundancy. People don't want to be seen as weak. They would prefer not to say they've got a back problem or a mental health problem, or even visual issues that might affect their driving, anything that might make them seem potentially weak, because then they think, oh, next time they're trying to cut down, they'll have me on the hit list. And so they can be very wary about going to a manager or going to occupational health. Sometimes there are issues like bullying, where the problem is with the manager. And so employees can find it very useful to have someone whom they perceive as independent. And the church still does have the brand of being discreet. People who have a very high expectation of confidentiality, and that's actually really helpful. So it is remarkable what some people will tell you. There are some people who won't tell you anything and are just indifferent or possibly even slightly hostile. But there's nearly always someone who will actually offload, that you think, I haven't even met you, and you've stopped your motorbike in the road and you're telling me all these things. And it's just the branding. It's because they perceive you as someone who can be trusted. And they may very well then say, oh, thank you very much, and drive on, and you never see them again. But it is interesting how people will vent or offload, and it's a sad reflection on modern society in some ways, that you think just the offer of listening can be so well received, that there are some people who clearly do not have that chance to be heard, and simply being heard is a welcome gift. I think in the video we saw Stuart Wood, who's the football chaplain, and the football manager saying they don't know what he's there for until something happens to them. And it is the case that it's often when there is a crisis and a tragic incident, that the value of the chaplaincy is exposed and enhanced. But we build the relationships anyway. It's a very long game, actually. And as I was saying before, if you're able to stick at it for years, that can provide a continuity that, again, in modern life, a lot of people don't have. And so you become valued just because you've been around. And I think politeness and patience and perseverance pays off. As relationships build, people feel able to say something, and sooner or later you have the child death, the cancer, the accident at work, something that causes people to question the deeper things of life. And then that relationship comes into its own. It's great that they know someone. And my third point was the difference that chaplaincy can make to the church. And I feel quite strongly about this. I think that chaplains model what the church should be doing anyway. That Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so I send you. We're called to be salt and light in the world, and all too often ministers Anglican ministers, of whom I am one, are confined within the walls and thinking about the bells and the churchyard and 100 things they have to do for their congregation, and it can be really hard to be engaging with the world. But Sunday by Sunday we send our people out, the people of God, out into the world, but some of them lack confidence about what they're supposed to do when they're out in the workplace. And so the chaplain really forms a bridge. I try to go to as many churches as I can, and it's always interesting for me because I spot people there that I have seen in the laundry, on the Innovation Centre, in the Science Park, in the BBC, who have not disclosed to me that they were Christians. And it may be that they haven't disclosed to anybody that they are Christians. But actually, when they see me there, they're quite pleased. And I say to their ministers, most of whom I know, did you know so-and-so works at the BBC and they've got a really important job doing whatever it is? And they go, oh, have they? Oh, I've been trying to get them on the children's rota for years, or whatever it is. And so often they don't really value the work that people do and equip them to be ministers, both by carrying out their work, but also by witnessing and having the confidence to say, yeah, I am a Christian. And if an organisation will accept a chaplain, they validate having a spiritual life. And it's often people of other faiths are really pleased to see you because they feel as if they don't care that you're a Christian. They think the Home Office, the organisation is saying it's okay to be a person of faith. It's okay to be someone who might say, I'd like a prayer room. You know, I say, oh, I'd like to use it for my midday prayers. Is it all right if I leave my Bible and things here? They're thrilled that, you know, there's someone there who wants to pray and that's seen as normal and that's okay. And it can really help people of faith at work to feel empowered to say something and to live out their faith more. And so I think we're in a missionary setting. In the 2011 census, 60% of people ticked that box, self-identifying as Christians. And the focus was all on, it's down from 70% to 60%. But you know, I think 6% is a lot, but maybe 5% show up on a Sunday. So there's a big wodge of people there that have expressed some Christian interests, but are not making it to public worship. And so I think there's a vital role really for getting out and trying to be available and in some measure disciple those people and encourage them in whatever flicker of interest or faith they have, and just to be there to witness to Christ's care for the workplace and for the people where they are. If we look at the Gospels, Jesus is not in the synagogue and the temple all the time. He's there where people are collecting taxes, where people are serving in bars, where people are running fishing businesses. Christ is present, engaging with them using illustrations as he speaks that refer to money, to profit, to investment, to forward planning and budgeting. Lots that we can use is there in the scriptures for us to help us proclaim the kingdom. And so my view, as you can tell, is that chaplaincy can make a considerable difference. Thank you, Paul.